If your team had less than a 15% chance to win, would you bet on them?
And it downpours to take him out of the air, and Ice is gonna jax him!
Everyone loves a good underdog story, and today I've got a crazy one for you. Enter Team Peps, a team that most people thought was on the brink of relegation. A team with a veteran player who already got written off as washed, surrounded by unproven talents. Nobody expected them to win. But not only did they pull off the upset, they did it in style, pulling off a reverse sweep against one of the biggest teams in Europe. So the question remains,
Help!
Let's break it down. Get ready to learn some secret Overwatch strategy that even top level teams don't know about yet. But first, let's meet the villains of the story, the Ultimates, who I'll now refer to as TU. These guys have one of the best coaches in the world, Christopher, one of the best Tracer players in the world, Kevster, a winner of the Overwatch World Cup, KSA, and a Winston Ball specialist, Chase. Keep that last bit in mind for later. On the other hand, Team Peps have Soon, who, if you don't know, was a veteran Tracer player way back in 2018 for the Overwatch League. Understandably, people think he's past his prime, but Soon made one of the most game-changing plays this series, so stick around for that. The rest of their roster either have players that people generally think are washed, or just mainly known for their ranked play. But as you'll find out, that just isn't true. Team Peps were initially down 0-2, with the second map, Suravasa, being an absolute blowout. But somehow, out of nowhere, they managed to turn it around. Starting in map 4, Colosseo, and TU banned Mauga, whereas Team Peps banned Sojourn. Mauga's got a good matchup into Ramattra, so banning him takes that option away from Team Peps. This forces both teams to play Ramattra, which is in TU's favour, since earlier in the series, Peps were constantly avoiding the Ramattra matchup. Comparatively, the Sojourn ban is to force Kai onto the Ashe, who's a way more diveable target. Speaking of dive, Team Peps roll out on a divier set of DPS, being Venture Tracer, whereas TU roll out on Genji Torb. If you remember the catch or backshot turrets from my Sim Torb video, this should look very familiar to you. Kai's turret basically gives the Tracer backshots, and it makes Soon's life so hard that he eventually dies for it. Now a man down, with significantly less frontline pressure, the core of TU end up rolling over the rest of Peps fairly easily. Despite losing the first fight, Peps make a smart adaptation, swapping from Venture Tracer to Ashe Torb. The reason this is so good is twofold. Firstly, it provides significantly more frontline pressure compared to Venture Tracer, giving the enemy Ramattra a harder time. Because of this, the Genji will be forced to mark the Ashe, but as long as she can live the dive from Genji, Ashe just does more. We can see that first point here, where KSA just gets battered by the Torb Ashe, meanwhile the Genji is just doing nothing. And by the time Kevster goes in, it's already too late, with FD God finishing the kill. Now entering the next fight, Skye pops the Ray, which forces Zerion to do so as well. However, TU end up over-investing the Blade and Molten Core. The reason why this is so bad is that both the Blade and Molten Core serve the same purpose, to deny the enemy team from using their Orbital Ray. So you only need one of them. On the bright side, Kevster did actually mark the Ashe, but it doesn't matter since FD God pops the beat, allowing him and his team to walk forwards. Interestingly, in just 2 minutes, FD God carries a 32% beat advantage. But how? Well, that's mainly because of his playstyle to be very defensive, amping heals around his team. But that's not the interesting parts. Seemingly, FD God only amps heals when Zerion pops his Hyper Ring so they don't lose out on the speed boost. This amp heal Hyper Ring combo happens again and again and again. This is such a cutting edge secret that I don't even think Chris knows about this yet, considering the more default playstyle from Faith, who's just playing with his Genji. Now clearly, there is a balance to be struck here, because FD God does actually need to help out his Tracer and break the turrets. But considering FD God is dying more on average and still having a 32% ult advantage, that is bonkers. Going back to the fight, KSA commits his Annihilation, which only forces out the Bob from Ken. This means that Peps won a fight only using 2 ultimates compared to the 4 from TU. It's quite ironic that a team called the Ultimates have some of the worst ultimate strategy in comparison to the other teams. Unfortunately for Peps, because TU now have their beat advantage, Faith decides to beat rush in on the Torb, with Soon panicking out his Molten Core, and Ice also wasting the Annihilation. Not a great trade. However, the silver lining is that Kai is finally on Ashe, the character that Peps wanted Kai to go on, which means that Soon can finally go Tracer in peace. As expected, Kevster on the Genji tries to get on top of the Ashe, but Ken coach guns away just in time with a really nice dynamite paired alongside a boop from FD Gods. Ashe players, pay attention, because this isn't the only time that Ken dynamites Kevster, because as you can see, it happened earlier. This is intentional by Ken. Instead of spamming out dynamite early, he forces the deflect from the Genji first, just by shooting him, then dynamites the Genji when he takes cover. Also, Kevster was honestly too greedy and kill focused with the dash. All that should have happened here is Kevster waits on the high ground while Faith gets his HP back. Then, Kevster dashes onto the Ashe just to zone her away, not looking to get a kill. Meanwhile, the Ram Lucio push up and the Lucio amps heals. This creates space for the Ashe and Juno to jump to high ground, giving them a great safe angle. Things end up getting messy on this end of the map, but pay attention to what Soon does. As soon as he exits recall, no pun intended, he steals the bot away from TU, who are too tunnel visioned on getting follow-up kills. This buys a ton of time for his team to come back from spawn and build up the rest of their ultimates. Thankfully for Team Peps, KSA walks in solo before his Genji or supports are even in position. As a result, despite the Annihilation and the Orbital Ray, KSA just gets completely burned in the face of 2 support ults. Things get even worse for him too. Straight after, when Ken throws out his Bob, it ends up zoning 4 players of TU. Soon's right there to follow up as well, landing a great stick onto Faith, showing that Unk still got it. Meanwhile, with the backline zoned, the rest of Team Peps turn onto KSA and burn right through him. And from there on, the rest of TU just keep making dumb mistakes. Kevster again, whether it's him being too kill focused, dashes onto FD God and frankly ends up feeding. Kevster does kind of make up for it this fight, catching 2 kills with the blade. However, FD God beats the washed allegations, catching 2 backliners without having to use a single ult himself. The Kevster beatdown doesn't stop here sadly. Ken does get very low on Ashe here, which causes Kevster to dash in order to finish the kill. The issue is that Kevster is once again too far away and too greedy for the kill, meaning that FD God is able to boop him away and chase the kill. Kevster's death isn't entirely on him though. Faith is trailing behind Kevster, so there's clearly some communicational disconnect between the two. Fingers crossed my Coach of the Year can fix it. For the last fight, KSA makes a good move in going early in an attempt to Ajax FD God, but now, with B off, it's very easy for the enemy Juno and Ashe to get dove, which is exactly what happens, and unsurprisingly, we enter reverse sweep territory. With TU being forced to play a map 5 now, things are looking rough. TU banned D.Va here first, whereas Peps banned Juno. The Juno ban is mainly because there aren't many things left to ban, so maybe they want to avoid a map 1 or a map 2 scenario, and force a Lucio-Kiri matchup. TU's D.Va ban though is confusing. The reason is that we're on a dive map, and KSA specializes in D.Va. He doesn't play Winston or Bull. Remember at the beginning when I mentioned how Chase, another tank player for TU, could play Bull or Winston? Well, here's where it would make sense to actually play him. But who knows? Maybe Chris just doesn't trust Chase anymore.
Cause my top 5 is Drake, 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 Drake!
If we broke it off, then you know it wasn't painless. If she got a watch, then you know it's not a stainless.
For the first fight on Numbani, KSA gets hit by a 10-ton train and gets blown up from the sheer poke from Team Peps. Pretty reminiscent to what we saw earlier on Colosseo. However, to how Icenom soft engages onto the enemy Sigma, which forces his grasp early. Soft engaging just means to make a low risk, medium reward play to primarily force out cooldowns. The point of this is to make your next engagement more lethal, which Team Peps does to a T. Something that's not done to a T though is how TU disengage. On second point, Zerion drops the Kitsune and the whole of TU back all the way up. So far, so good. However, the mistake here is that Sky doesn't stand his own ground and pop his own Kitsune. Credit to Coach Capitology for this idea, but you can only disengage once in this game. You can't keep running forever. You need to eventually grow some balls and actually fight, which Sky could have done here with Kitsune. Especially considering the 2 angles that the Genji and Sigma have, they definitely could have fought back here. Afterwards, Peps does a spawn hold, which does add some style points, but it's mainly to counter the Sigma, who doesn't want a close fight. Ice gets a great wall on the Sigma, which allows FD God to boop him off the high ground, and by that point there's just not much KSA can do. Now you see how much Christopher shot himself in the foot by banning D.Va. KSA can't even swap because he's already got Flux. So surely this Flux was great, right?
Now they come in, Suzu gets forced out, Flux from KSA to try and turn it, Downpour to take him out of the air, and Ice is gonna jax him! Faith goes off the map as well, and the Ultimates are having all sorts of problems here. Is KSA gonna swap? I imagine he's gonna swap here. We can't go D.Va. Could have done with a D.Va right there.
TU eventually break the spawn hold, but at the cost of having under 90 seconds on the clock and Team Peps coming up to 4 ultimates. Peps start by popping the overclock, and again, TU take a good back step. However, KSA wastes his wall, and I wish I could tell you what this wall does for educational purposes, but I just can't. Ice probably spotted this mistake and ends up punishing KSA for it. Had KSA not wasted his wall, he could have stood his ground with spikes. The last fight on defense though, Peps read TU like a book. They probably know that because of the beat advantage, TU want to play fast and rush him with beats. Ice, however, has different ideas. The second KSA pops his spikes and Faith drops the beat, Ice covers his team with spikes, catching both the Hazard and Torb. Paired with the Molten Core under their feet, both the Torb and Hazard eventually get melted, allowing Peps to finish their defense. For the cherry on top of the slaughter that we've seen, Peps finished this map with Ice on Doomfist. He soft engages yet again, forcing out Torb's overloads. So, once the Doomfist has his cooldowns back, he can dive and punish the Torb, who hasn't got his overloads. The Kitsune as well just makes each of these engages faster to not give the enemy team time to get their cooldowns back. Couple in a late overclock, and you've got one of the most inspirational reverse sweeps that we've seen in a minute.
Let's go! Fucking go! Oh my god. Holy I'm about to cry.
From cutting edge ult strategy, tactical swaps, and smart engages, Team Peps didn't just win, they earned this reverse sweep. Of course, TU had to make a few blunders in terms of their communicational issues, problematic map drafting, and general carelessness of abilities to throw this game away, but that shouldn't diminish from what Peps did here. Do keep in mind that hero perks come into pro play next weekend, so be sure to follow my Twitch as I'll be co-streaming the new era of Overwatch. As always, check out this video on screen if you enjoyed. Until next time.